All right, Javosai, good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking our sponsors. Thank you. To thank Yankee and Elisa Stammen and Yizzy and Rebecca Stammen for dedicating all the shiurim this month in commemoration of the first yahrzeit of their sister, Menucha Sheindel Yehudis Zichron Levracha Bas David Yosef. And to thank Shmuel Rabin Karabkin for dedicating the shiurim this month in commemoration of the 25th yahrzeit of Rabbi's mother, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim Zichron Levracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in the Chama. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsor today, Nachum Eskin, in the schus of a refuah shlema for his father, Yoel Yisrael Ben Gittel. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, built together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, will have a complete and enduring refuah. And so with that, let us begin. We have a really fascinating daf ahead of us today. Really fascinating. Some great halacha l'maisa as well. So today's daf is Chaf Gimel 23. We are picking up Emir Hashem on Chaf Beis Amud Beis. I believe we left off Mishtabich Le Rava, which is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines up from the bottom on 22b. Right? So we ended off with a little bit of halacha l'maisa of Hilchasa Poschin Becharata. And again, we're going to qualify these halacha l'maisa components a little bit tomorrow a little bit. But remember, again, the concept that simple remorse serves as a basis for revocation of a neder. Now, I'll say, by the way, I know we said it, but I'll just explicitly say it because it's going to come up again. Even though we say that you could go ahead and revoke a neder with charata, with simple remorse, obviously that requires me still to go to a Talmud Chacham. In other words, the process of revocation can never happen on your own, always requires an outside party. Now, when ultimately again, so revocation or annulment requires one Talmud Chacham, a Beis Din, so that Emir Hashem will get into. But when we say Poschin Becharata, so that doesn't mean I made a neder, now I go ahead and I sincerely regret it, okay, so now I regret it, I'm done. No, even though again at the end of the day I've regretted it, L'maisa, I need the process. Okay, sorry. I need the process ultimately again of going to the Talmud Chacham or going to the Beis Din. Good, so let's go back. That's a great story. Mishtabich le Rava, Rav Nachman b'Rav Sechora, the Adam Gadol. So listen to this. Rava used to always tell Rav Nachman how great of a man Rav Sechora was. Okay, so Amar Lo, so Rav Nachman said to Rava, listen, Kishi Yavo liyadecha, do me a favor, when this guy Rav Sechora visits you next, please, by all means, heviu liyadi. Bring him to meet me. Bring him to meet me. You know these stories never end well, right? But the Gemara always has stories like this. So in any event, so Rav is telling Rav Nachman, Rav Sechora is such a great guy. Rav Nachman says, great, bring him to meet me the next time he's in town. So what happens? So the Gemara says, so now, sure enough, Rav Sechora comes to town. He comes to meet Rav Nachman. Havele, Rav Sechora had a neder, l'mishra. He had a neder that he wanted permitted, that he wanted revoked. So Asala Kamed Rav Nachman. So Rav Sechora figures, listen, I'm in town anyway. Let me go to Rav Nachman. I'll meet Rav Nachman, and at the same time I'll take care of my neder. So what happens? Asala Kamed Rav Nachman. Amrle. So now again, Rav Sechora tells Rav Nachman, I have a neder, and I'd like it to be revoked. So Amrle, Nadar Daita Dahachi. So we'll say, here's what happens in this story. So Rav Nachman is trying to find a Pesach for Rav Sechora. So he says to him, Nadar Daita Dahachi, tell me, when you made the neder, did you have this in mind? So again, Rav Nachman was hoping the answer would be no. No, I didn't think about this. Oh, you didn't think about this? But had you thought about this, you would have never made the neder. Look at the Ran for just a moment. 3 lines up from the bottom of the Ran. Hai dilo pasach le becharata, afapid Rav Nachman gufei pasach hilchasa de pochsim becharata, the fish Rav Nachman hayamake bid Rav Safra de lo asala kamei ela kadesh yimsa pesach, sheyamachmir alatzmo, shelo lihios niter becharata. So we'll say, this is actually quite interesting. So what the Ran is intrigued by is, Rav Nachman, why are you trying to find the Pesach? If we've just established that what? That charata works. So we'll say, by the way, charata is like 1, 2, 3, you're done. You come to Beis Din, I regret ever having made the neder. I don't have to get into more than that, right? Yet it's interesting over here that Rav Nachman is trying to find the Pesach. Remember, what's Pesach? Pesach is an opening, meaning that I now am cognizant of information that had I been cognizant of at the time that I made the neder, I would have never made the neder. So Rav Nachman is really like drilling down to this into Rav Safra. So the Ran is bothered by this. So the Ran explains one or two possibilities. Possibility one is that although you can permit a neder with charata, that's not the lechatchila, right? The ideal is a Pesach, which makes sense. So also remember again, what's the difference between Pesach and charata? Pesach, if you could find the Pesach, what does that do? It almost creates a reality in which the neder is retroactively void. That's almost what it does. In other words, that had I known this, I would have never made the vow to begin with. That's powerful. That's powerful. That's almost like a retroactive nullification as opposed to charata. What's charata? Charata is like, I want out now. Again, the neder was a solid neder. Like there's nothing wrong with the neder itself. So possibility one is that Rav Nachman would have preferred to use the mechanism of charata. The Ran gives another example. It says, so ultimately, and the Ran then gives a second answer about maybe it was a different kind of neder, but we don't have to get into that now. Fine. So what happens? So Rav Nachman says to Rav Safra, did you have this in mind? I'm really in, right? Rav Schora, said, yeah, I had that in mind, and I still made the neder. Adaited the hachi. So again, Rav Nachman tries again. Tell me, maybe you didn't have this in mind. Did you have this in mind when you made the neder? Yeah, Rav Schora said, yeah, I had that in mind as well. Kama zimnin. So both say, so what happens? So this kept on happening. Rav Nachman kept on trying to find a Pesach for Rav Schora. And every single time that Rav Nachman tried to help, or Rav Schora did was say, yeah, I had that in mind, So we'll say, what happened? Ikbid Rav Nachman got angry. Amar lei, zil l'kilach. Essentially, he said, get out of here. Get out of here, right? Get out of here. Kilo is a covered area. Is like covered area. So he said, get out of here. Just go to the covered area. Nafak Rav Schora, Pasach Pesach Nafshe. Rav Schora left and he found his Pesach. Rabbi will say, what was his Pesach? So the Gemara says, here's what was his Pesach. Schor thought to himself, it's such a beautiful Gemara. Rabbi Omer, Ezu hiderach yishar she'yavar lo adam. They will say, what is the right path a person should choose for themselves in life? It's a Mishnah in Perek Yavis, right? What is the correct path to choose in life? Kol shehi tiferes la'oseha, whatever brings honor to those who go ahead and live in that path and live in that direction. V'tiferes lo mina adam. And also creates good relationships with other people. The hashtag de ikbid Rav Nachman adaiti de hachi lo nadar. So Rav Schora says, you know what? Had I realized that this neder would have caused so much pain to Rav Nachman, I would have never chosen to take the neder. And what happened? He permitted the neder for himself. Now, I both say, this is why I mentioned before, Shar l'nafshei does not mean that Rav Schora permitted the neder for himself. You can't permit a neder for yourself. You have to go back to a Talmid Chacham. The point over here is, he found his own Pesach. Now, I both say, this is not a conventional Pesach. Why not? Because interestingly enough, this Pesach has really nothing to do with the neder itself, right? In other words, generally, a Pesach has something to do with the vow, right? Even charata has what to do with the vow. Here, interestingly enough, he doesn't regret having made the neder. He regrets the impact the neder had ultimately again on Rav Nachman. But again, just an interesting example of this, and also a beautiful articulation of the Mishnah. Reb Shimon Berebi, Havile Nidra the Mishra. Another story. Reb Shimon, the son of Rabbi, had a neder that he wanted to have revoked. So what did he do? He comes before the rabbis, comes before a group of rabbanim in order to have his neder revoked. Amrle, so they're trying to find from a Pesach. Amrle, nadarta adaiti dahachi, amr in. So again, they try to bring out, so tell me, like when you made the neder, maybe did you have in mind for this? So they were trying to find for him something that he didn't have in mind at the time of the neder, that had he had in mind, he would not have made the neder. But again, he says, yeah, did you have this in mind? Amr in. Adaiti dahachi, in. Did you have this in mind? He said yes. So I will say, kama zimnin. So this happened a whole bunch of times of the Rabbanon trying to find the Pesach, and ultimately, again, Reb Shimon Berebi saying, yeah, I had this man. So what happened? Top of Chav Gimel. V'have mitztari Rabbanon mishimsha l'tula u'mitula l'shimsha. So we'll say, literally what this means is, the rabbis were inconvenienced and they were constantly going back and forth from the sun to the shade and from the shade to the sun. Now, what does this mean? If you take a look at Rashi says over here as follows. Rashi says, V'avim mitztari Rabbanan, v'hayu nosim mishemesh l'tzel, umisel l'shemesh, mirov tuga, shelo hayu yodin lomar divrei pesach lecharataso. So according to Rashi, this lashon over here, ultimately of going from the sun to the shade to the sun, is a lashon ultimately again of like pacing back and forth, right? They're pacing back and forth to try to figure out a Pesach ultimately for Reb Shimon. And what happens? Skip the parentheses. Amar le batnis berei da abashol ben batnis mi nadarta adaita demitztari rabana mitula l'shimsha or mishimsha l'tula. So we'll say, so this individual batnis goes ahead and says over to Reb Shimon, tell me, Reb Shimon, did you have in mind that your neder would cause so much distress to the Rabbanon? And ultimately, Amar lo, he said no, v'shayruha. And ultimately, again, this became the Pesach, or this became the Pesach. It was not really a Pesach. This became the Charata, and ultimately, again, it became the Pesach, and ultimately the neder was permitted. So we're going to see, we actually don't accept these forms of Pesach. They're not going to work because they're too unrelated to the neder itself. We're going to see, even if we accept Charata, which we do, halacha l'maisa, even if we accept Pesach, of course, it has to be that there's something flawed in the neder itself, not someone else's external reaction to that neder. We'll see that in Meretz Hashem and the Rambam. I will say, I just want to draw your attention just to one beautiful piece of the Ran. If you look at the Ran on Chav Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines down from the top, guys, so remember again, back in the previous story, Rav Schora, when he saw the negative reaction that Rav Nachman had to his neder, so he said, so what did he realize? He remembered the teaching of Rebbe, that what's the proper path that a person should choose for himself? Kol shehi tif'eres la'oseha. Whatever brings literally glory to the one who performs or lives on that path. So if you look at the Quran, it's very beautiful. He says, shehi mitzad atzma mishubachas. Now we'll say the goal in life is to choose a path. Shehi mitzad atzma mishubachas. Such a profound statement. See, Rabbi say, the goal in life is to choose a direction and to choose a lifestyle that doesn't require explanation. You know, I will say sometimes we do something in life and I need a whole lot of Rashi to explain why what I'm doing is okay. Right? It's okay. I'm going to tell you why it's okay. Right? It's okay because of this and because of that. So what the Gemara is saying over here is, if you need a lot of Rashi to explain why you're doing what you're doing in life, chances are it's not really the right thing to do. The Ran explains the concept of any derech, kol shi tiferes lo seah, any path in life that brings glory to the one who performs it. He says, shehi mitzad atzma mishubachas. It means a lifestyle. It means a pathway in life that stands on its own. It emits this beauty on its own without any further explanation. Ad shi tiferes la'adam ha'osa osa, v'tiferes la'min ha'adam shakol mikal sinabo. So we'll say, so again, a very just a beautiful explanation of that idea. What's something so beautiful to aspire to? To imagine, we'll say, if I'm able to get to a level where I live a life where my actions don't require explanation. Right? Imagine for a moment if somebody was watching a video of my entire day. I know that there would be things I'd have to say. One second, you know what? Pause that for a second. Let me explain that to you, right? Let me give you a little bit of context. Let me give you a little bit of explanation. Imagine living a life where everything I did didn't require explanation, where somehow my actions just stand on their own. They're clear. So someone watching the video of my day understands how I live, what I do, why I do the things that I do. That's what Rabbi is saying. That's derech yishara. The proper path in life is to live a life where my actions don't require any further hesber. They don't require any further explanation. They don't require any Rashi. My actions stand and have clarity on their own. Incredible. Let's go back there. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. Both these great stories. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi, Avele Nidra Lemishra. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi ultimately, again, had a neder that he wanted to have permitted. So, right, Rabbi Shmuel made a neder. He wanted to have the neder permitted. Asla Kamayad Rabbanon. He came before the rabbis, and again, they're trying to help him find the Pesach. Amrulei, Nadarta Daita Dahachi. Tell me, did you have this in mind? Amruluhu, and yeah, I had that in mind. Nadarta Daita Dahachi. Did you have this in mind? Amruluhu, and yeah, I had that in mind as well. So he's not really helping them out. They're trying to find from a Pesach. and every Pesach that they fight, right? Would you have this? Yeah, I had that in mind. So we'll say what happened. Comes in, and this happened a whole bunch of times until something fascinating happened. Kevan de chazu katzra de kamistari rabbanon machye ba'ochla de katzri. So also listen to this. There was a guy, a launderer, right? Literally, not of money, of clothing, right? So we'll say, so again, he's walking by, he sees this exchange. This is incredible. So what does he do? He hit Rabbi Shmuel with his laundering stick. We'll say the laundering stick is right. They would beat the clothing when you're laundering it, or they would sprinkle water with the stick. Whatever they would do, it was a stick. So what did he do? He hit Rabbi Shmuel with the stick. Why? So the Gemara says why? Because he saw that Rabbi Shmuel was going out and annoying the rabbis. So he hit him with the stick. So Amr Adaiti Demachi Likitzra Lo Nadri. Rabbi Shmuel said, you know what? Had I realized that as a result of this neder, I would have been hit with a launderer stick, I would have never made the neder. And ultimately, again, v'shariye l'nafshe, and he permitted the neder for himself. Again, I will say. So once again, these are interesting applications of the concept of charata, because the truth is they're not really regretting the neder itself, but rather regretting someone else's reaction to that neder. And I will say, now this raises a fascinating question. The Gemara says, "Hi no latu." And I will say, this is actually very interesting. We are going to see that when it comes to revocation of Nedarim, there's something called nolad. Nolad means a brand new circumstance that was not in existence before. We are going to learn that you cannot be matir a neder. You can't permit a neder on the basis of nolad, on the basis of like a brand new circumstance. In other words, what is interesting is the only way to be matir a neder is with some circumstance which has been present. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Rabbi Shmuel just got hit with a launderer stick. How can you go in and be matir neder based on that? That's nolad. That's a brand new circumstance. Rabbi say this is incredible. So the Gemara says, and after all, again, I'm sorry. Hi nolad tu delo masikadaiti demachilekes. Rabbi Tanina, we learned ein poschen lo benolad. You cannot go ahead and create a Pesach, an opening for a neder with nolad. If you look at Rashi says over here, ein poschen benolad. Rashi says, she'ein roi li ara kazeh avahani damar de mistari rabbanan lab milsa nolad. So both say. So remember again, in this case of Rabbi Shmuel, this is nolad. Why is this nolad? This is a guy who's coming off the street and hitting Rabbi Shmuel with a stick. So I will say that's a brand new circumstance that just came about that was not even present at all. In other words, even in the previous cases, where let's say again, the charata was based on the fact that my neder annoyed the Rabbanon. My neder annoyed Rav Nachman. So I will say, so that again, that is a present thing, that such a neder annoyed. But a guy coming off the street and hitting Rabbi Shmuel with a stick, that's nolad. The boss is actually fascinating. Amrle, hilo nolad too. The truth is that's not nolad. Why is that not nolad? Listen to this. Because there are always people with chutzpah who are happy to give Rabbanim a difficult time. Now, we'll say, now what does that mean? What that means is like this. That's not a statement of Rabbi Shmuel, right? Now, Rabbi Shmuel happens to be giving the Rabbanim a difficult time. Who is this launderer, right? And why is he going ahead and hitting Rabbi Shmuel with a stick? So the Gemara understands is like this. There are always people who are looking to give it to the rabbi, right? Always people who are looking to go ahead. And what happens? Most normal people aren't going to lash out, right? When everything is normal. Instead, what do these people do? These people, right? What do these people do? They wait for an opportunity where they could do something to the Rabbanim, where they could do something. So when there's a moment, so what happens? So this guy, who is this launderer, right? He's coming along, and what does he see? He sees Rabbi Shmuel annoying the Rabbanim. And suddenly, again, this guy becomes the defender of rabbinic integrity and comes and hits Rabbi Shmuel with a stick because he's giving a difficult time to Rabbanim. He's not defending rabbinic integrity. Instead, what is he doing? He's trying to go ahead and give it to Rabbi Shmuel. That's not nolad. Incredible. That's not nolad. That people want to go ahead and take out negativity on the rabbi, right? On the Rabbanim. That's not nolad. That's as old as time itself. And therefore, again, that is a present condition. And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, well, not halacha l'maisa, but at least for this story, it represents a proper Pesach. Incredible, incredible. I was saying, sometimes you learn so much from Gemara, not even from the halacha, but just like from the human nature statements. Again, we think that sometimes, again, the issues that we deal with are like new issues. The truth is, to be very honest, this, like Shlomo HaMelech says, in Chadash Tachas HaShemesh, there's nothing new under the sun. There's no real new problems of the human condition. It's the same stuff. It just manifests itself different ways at different times, but so fascinating. Let's go back there. The Visu Dabaye, both say great story. I've run out of good like descriptive terms to put in the WhatsApp messages the night before, but just expect that it's just going to be fascinating. This is great. So the Visu Dabaye, get ready for this. The wife of Abaye. So both say Abaye married a woman. This was a second marriage, and she had a daughter from a previous marriage. Okay, so what happened? Hu Amar, first wide line, Chav Kimel Madalif. Hu Amar likrivai. He Amra likrivai. It was time to marry off his daughter. Abaye said, "I want her to marry my relatives." Right? She was a good girl. Abaye wanted her to marry into his family. The mother said, "No, I want her to marry a member of my family." Amrle, so Abaye says, Tisara hanaasi aloch I avadata adaita umin sabas le'likrivach. So we'll say, Abaye makes a neder. He says to his wife, I hereby, any benefit that you get from me shall be prohibited if you marry off this girl to a member of your family. Okay, already, bad idea. But Abaye does it. We've all been there, right? Abaye does it, right? Let's say, you know how like sometimes in a relationship, a husband says, you know what? I'm taking a stand, right? You've had that moment, and then like, oh, bad idea. Don't take a stand, right? I'm taking a stand, Abaye said, right? I'm drawing my line in the stand, right? I'm taking an edge. If you do this, I hereby prohibit any anah to you. What happened? Azlas va'avras al daite ve'intzebe likrive. Shockingly, Abaye's wife did what she wanted, right? And what happens? She went ahead and she married off the girl. By the way, her daughter. This is her daughter. She married off. You can still imagine like how this conversation goes, right? You're not going to tell me what to do with my daughter. In any event, she goes ahead and she marries off her daughter to her relative. Now we have a problem. What's the problem? We'll say, Abaye made a neder. This is great. So now Abaye is in a real pickle. We'll say, by the way, how affirming is it to know that even Abaye gets himself into marital trouble, right? So Lemaisa again, so Abaye now has a problem. What's his problem? He's now made a neder that his wife is not permitted to get that. He's assered any hana from him onto his wife. So ultimately, what does he do? Rabbi Yosef comes before Rabbi Yosef. Let's listen to this. This is great. Comes before Rabbi Yosef. Amarle. So Rabbi Yosef says to him. Now he comes before Rabbi Yosef. You can imagine how that conversation goes as well, right? Rabbi Yosef, you got to help a brother out over here, right? Like this is like right. I'm stuck, right? What are we going to do over here? Amarle host. Listen to this. Rabbi Yosef says, "Ilu hava yadas da'avart al daitech uminsa balei krivei miadart." So this is fascinating. Rabbi Yosef says to Abaye, had you known that your wife would not care at all about the neder you made, and gone ahead and gone against your will and done what she wanted, would you have ever made the neder? Amar lo. Abaye says, of course not. L'shayir Rav Yosef. And Rav Yosef permitted the neder. Now I will say, this is a fascinating form of Pesach. Why, Rabbi say? Why? Omi shariki agavna? Does that make any sense? Rabbi say, see what's happening over here? Had you known that your wife, who was the subject of your neder, the reason you made the neder, would have transgressed the neder, would you have ever made the neder? What? I was supposed to say, you know what's happening? Abaye made a neder that his wife should not get any hana from him if she marries off her daughter to her relative. That's the neder he made. So essentially what Rav Yosef was saying to him was, had you realized that she was really going to do what you prohibited her to do, would you have ever made the neder? So Gemara says, that's a really strange form of Pesach. So the Gemara says, can you go ahead and permit the neder in this particular fashion? So the Gemara says, you can. Vatanya, we learned, there was once a time of a man who made a neder prohibiting his wife. Now both say, la'alos l'regel b'pashtos means literally going up to Yerushalayim for the regalim. He made a neder. He did not want his wife going to Yerushalayim. The Ran has a different girsa of this. Maybe it's not to Yerushalayim. Maybe it's to visit a relative. Okay, it doesn't really matter for our purposes. But Lamais, he made a neder prohibiting his wife from going on aliyah l'regel. Va'avra al daito va'al sil regel. She did not comply with his neder. She did what she wanted, and she was all the regel. Then Rabbi say, of course, she is prohibited. So, or I should say, his hana is prohibited to her. So Lamai says, so what happened? What happened? So Balifnei Rabbi Yossi, the husband came before Rabbi Yossi. Amarlo ve'ilu hayisa yodea shaveres al datech va'ola l'regel klum hidarta. Had you known that she was really going to violate your neder, right? Violate your will, and go ahead and be out ola regel, would you have ever made the neder? So Amar lo. So the husband said, no, I would have never made the neder. And ultimately, again, vihitiru Rabbi Yossi. And ultimately, Rabbi Yossi permitted. So we see now that in this form, this is also a form of charata. Also a form of charata, and really a form of Pesach as well. In other words, had I realized, essentially what the Pesach over here is like this. Had I realized at the time that I made the neder, that the subject of the neder would have never complied with the neder, I would have never made the neder. So again, it's interesting because it seems to be a form of Pesach that fundamentally goes against the whole, in other words, the whole reason I'm making the neder, the whole reason Abaye is making the neder is so his wife shouldn't do something. So it's a fascinating Pesach that had I realized that she was never going to listen to me to begin with, I would have never made the neder. And Abba say Allah Lamaisa, the Gemara seems to indicate that such a Pesach actually works. So therefore, Abba say, what we have over here is we have charata. We've seen over here that interestingly enough, the Gemara brings examples of even charata that is not related to the actual neder itself, but is rather related to what? Other third parties' reaction to that neder may also be charata, though we'll have to see if halacha lamais we actually accept that. And now we actually see another form of Pesach, which actually says that had I realized that the subject of the neder would have never complied to begin with the neder, I would have never made the neder to begin with. Halacha lamais said that works ultimately again to go ahead and revoke the neder. Rabbi say, by the way, you'll say to yourself, come on, that's such loose definitions of Pesach. So understand, we'll say, what's driving all of this? The halacha has a vested interest in what? In what? In revoking Nedarim. Rabbi say, remember again, that's the important thing to remember in all of this. We don't like Nedarim. That was yesterday's daf. If you go ahead and you make a neder, it's as if you've built a bama. And if you fulfill the neder, it's as if what? As if what? Right? You've offered a sacrifice on it. We don't like nedarim. The halacha has a vested interest in getting people out of their neder. It's like, like sometimes your commercials are getting people out of their timeshares, right? Because again, it's such a bad idea to be stuck in a timeshare. So lahavdil, right? It's a bad idea to be stuck in a neder. Why? Because every moment that you're stuck in a neder, you run the risk of what? Of what? A violation. So I'm pointing out, so like if it sounds like, oh my gosh, like this is like such a strange and relaxed application of these laws, yes, by definition, that's what this is, because the halacha wants people out of their timeshares, halacha wants people out of their nedarim. We don't want people being stuck in a construct that is only going to have negative consequences. Incredible. Says the Mishnah, we'll say, it's great. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer. We'll say, this is fascinating. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, Af harotze lahadres chavero sheyochal etzlo, Yomar Laswa say, okay, it's so interesting that like there's a Mishnah dedicated to this. So both say, this is the fine situation. It must be dedicated to this because this was a common thing. I want Reuven to come and eat at my house. Reuven is always resistant. So we'll say, what's the best way to get Reuven to come and eat at my house? To make a neder. And what's the neder? Reuven, if you don't come over for lunch, all of my property is usher to you. It's an interesting way to cultivate friendships, but Lamais again, so I will say, but here's what's interesting. The fact that there's a Mishnah dedicated to this indicates that like there was, again, this is meant in a good way, right? This is meant, I want to compel Reuven to come and share a meal with me. That's what I want. So this is interesting. So the Mishnah says, Belazar says, if I want to make a neder to get my friend to eat next to me, they're both saying, now in this neder, do I really want to prohibit my property to Reuven if he doesn't come and eat with me? Do I want to do that? Not at all. So, but yet, I wanna make it sound like I'm making a neder because I really want Reuven to come and eat with me. But I don't really want to make a neder. So what should you do? Yomar lo kol neder sha'ani asid lidar hu batal. What you should say is, after you make that neder, you make another statement. What's the other statement? Any neder that I will vow in the future should be batal. So essentially, I will say what you do is you make a proactive statement of future bittul. Future bittul. Any neder I make is ultimately batal. However, you have to remember this t'nai at the time you're making the neder. So ultimately, again, if you go out and you make a statement, any neder I'm going to make should be batal, and then you go out and you make a neder, the neder is batal. The neder is batal. It's proactive nullification. It's not even nullification. Essentially, what the statement does is it prevents your nedarim from taking effect. As long as what? As long as what? You remember the t'nai. You don't have to articulate it, but you remember the t'nai at the time that you're taking the neder. So we'll say, let's analyze this. The chayvan the amar kol neder shani asid lidar yehi batal lo shamalei v'lo asabadei. I don't understand. I'll say, let's play this out. I go over to Ruvain. Ruvain, I want you to come to my house for lunch. And if you don't come to my house for lunch, then ultimately, again, all of my property is usher to you. And then I say, and any neder I take will ultimately be void. So Gemara says, doesn't that kind of defeat the entire purpose? Right at the end of the day, Reuben's going to hear the nullification as well, and the whole plan is out the window. To which the Gemara says the best two words in Gemara, Amid Beis Chisrei Mechsera. Chisrei Mechsera is always like, when you're a kid and you find that prize in the cereal box, right? It's incredible. You struggled. Chisrei Mechsera means, wow, listen to this. There's something missing. Here we go. Chisrei Mechsera V'achi Katani. I will say the Mishnah is missing a piece. Here's how you have to read the Mishnah. I will say you're going to see this Mishnah is perhaps one of the most profound Mishnahs we've learned so far. Listen to this. V'achi Katani. Harotze sheyochal eslo chavero u'misarev bo. U'misarev bo. I want my friend Reuven to come and eat with me. Reuven doesn't want to come over. So what do? Umadiro. I make a neder. I say, Reuven, if you don't come to my house for lunch, kol nechasai asur lecha. All of my property is asur to you. So the Gemara says, how do you look at such a neder? Nidre zerazinhu. Oh, we'll say, going back to our last Mishnah. What kind of neder is that, Rabbosai? What kind of neder is that? That's nidre zerazin. Rabbosai, what's nidre zerazin? What's nidre zerazin? Right? It's hyperbolic neder, hyperbole neder, hyperbolic neder. In other words, Rabbosai say, there's no intention to take a neder. Rather, I'm just going ahead and using strong lashon in order to motivate a person to action. Right? The seller says, I'm not selling it for less than 4 dinar. The buyer says, I'm not buying it for more than 2 dinar. Neither, and then they make a nedarim. It's not a neder. So we'll say, if you make a neder like this and say to your friend, Reuven, you need to come over for lunch, and if you don't, all my property is asur to you. By the way, halacha number 1, that's not a neder. That's nidre zerazin. That's halacha 1. Now watch this. We'll say, now there's a separate halacha. What's the separate halacha? We'll say, here we go. Get ready for this. What happens in general if a person doesn't want his nedarim to take effect throughout the year? We'll say, I've now learned Maseches Nedarim, only the first 23 blots, but I know enough to know that nedarim are bad and nedarim are not, and that they're dangerous. So now, how do I create a mechanism, a proactive mechanism to ensure that my nedarim do not take effect throughout the year? So what should you do? Here we go. Ya'amo b'Rosh Hashanah. You should stand up at Rosh Hashanah, v'yomar, and you should say, Kol neder sha'ani asid lidar yihiyeh batel. Sounds a little bit familiar, right? Again, we're going to see this Gemara is the makar for Kol Nidre. So listen to this. What should you do? You should stand at Rosh Hashanah. He's giving the example of Rosh Hashanah, but of course, you could do this anytime you want throughout the year. The example of doing this on Rosh Hashanah is that I'm standing up at the calendrical beginning of the year, and I'm making a statement. Kol neder sha'ani asid lidar. Any neder I'm going to make, yihiyeh batel. Should be batel. However, obelvad sheyeh zachar b'shas haneder. But I will say there's a caveat. What's the caveat? You have to remember the t'nai at the time you're making a neder. So in other words, now remember, you don't have to articulate the t'nai at the time you make the neder, but you have to have in mind. Now I know what you're thinking to yourself. 1 second, if I've made the t'nai, then what? Why am I making Nedarim? So we're going to see people because sometimes need to go ahead and make a neder, at least go through the motions of making a neder for a whole variety of purposes, right? To show someone I'm serious about something or for whatever the reason. But Lamaisa, the Gemara says if you make this proactive tonight at the beginning of the year, essentially it prevents any of your Nedarim from taking hold. But again, one condition, which is you have to remember the Tanai at the time you're making the neder. To which the Gemara says, 1 second. Izachar, no. Let's play this out. If I remember the Tanai at the time that I'm making the neder, akre l'Tanai, v'kayim le'lenedrei. So the Gemara suggests, but 1 second, it should be just the opposite. If I remember the Tanai that I made, and I still make a neder, what does that show? What does that show? That I'm usurping the Tanai, that I'm negating the Tanai and making a neder as well. So therefore, you're right. Amar Abaye Tani ubilvad shelo yehi zachar b'shas haneder. Abaye says, no. The way it should really mean is like this. If I make this proactive tonight at the beginning of the year, that any neder I make throughout the year should be batal, and then I make a neder, as long as I don't remember the Tanai at the time I make the neder, the Tanai works. Bless you, the Tanai works. I will say, if I explicitly remember the Tanai at the time I make the neder, then what am I effectively doing by making the neder? I am usurping or undermining or negating the Tanai. Take a look at the Ran for just a moment. I will say, first wide line in the Ran. Amar Abaye Tani ubilvad shelo yehi zachar b'shas haneder u'mishum hachi batel shekvar hisna shem yishkach v'yidor b'yibatel Tanai zeh es nidro. So I will say, according to Abaye, we're going to see is according to Abaye, here's how the Tanai works. The Tanai works like this. On Rosh Hashanah, I go ahead and I say, any neder I make throughout the year should be batal. Now I both say, what's the intention of that statement? The intention of that statement is, I'm not making any nedarim. But should I forget and make a neder? Now, the fact that I forget to make a neder means I'm forgetting the Tanai as well. That's when the Tanai kicks in. So one more time, look at the Rosh. The Ran. Umishum batal shekvar hisna. What's the Tanai? Shem yishkach v'yidar. That if I forget this Tanai that I made, and I go ahead and I make a neder, yibatel Tanai ezeh es nidro. The Tanai should be mabatel the neder. But Abaye says it only works if ultimately, again, you forget that you made the Tanai. Because if I make a neder and I'm fully cognizant of the Tanai, then what have I done? The neder has effectively negated the Tanai. Incredible. Rava says, no, not necessarily. The olam kidamrina meikara. It could very well be, Rava says, that what we're talking about over here is, no, that maybe it only works when dafka, you do remember the Tanai. And what's the case? Hachamay askinon, kigon shehisna b'Rosh Hashanah, v'lo yada b'ma hisna. It was very interesting. Maybe the case of it is like this. I made a Tanai in Rosh Hashanah. Now, in Rava's case, I made a Tanai about certain Nedarim, and I don't remember what type of Nedarim. So, for example, Rabbi say, in Rava's case, I made a Tanai that any Neder I make about bread, right, should be batal. But now, the year goes on, I don't remember, did I make a Tanai about bread? Did I make a Tanai about wine? Did I make a Tanai about fruit? I know that I made a Tanai about some type of Nedarim, but I don't remember what type of Nedarim I made the Tanai about. So the Gemara says, now I'm making a Neder. So therefore, again, according to Rava, if you remember the Tanai at the time you make the Neder, and ultimately I say, I don't remember the Tanai that I made, but I'm making this Neder with the previous Tanai in mind, then Nidra less be mamasha. Then the neder will not take hold because the Tanai will undermine it. Lo amra al das harishona. Ultimately, again, but if he does not invoke the original Tanai, then Lo amra al das harishona neder akri l'Tanai v'kaim l'nidrei. Then you've uprooted the Tanai, and ultimately the neder remains in effect. So both say. So let's just analyze this here for just a moment. So I just want to point out, according to this approach, and the Ran points this out, Rava and Abaye are not arguing. They're talking about two different cases. Let's go through this. In Abaye's case, Abaye's case is a conventional case where what? I take a neder, I make a Tanai at the beginning of the year. What's my Tanai at the beginning of the year? Any neder I make, kulan yahon, betelin, umuvutalin. Lashirin v'lakayomin. Right? We're going to see this is Kol Nidre. This is Kol Nidre. So again, I say at the beginning of the year, and I say my Nedarim should not take effect. So Abaye says, beautiful, beautiful, but it only works if what? It only works if what? If you don't remember the Tanai. So Abaye says the effectiveness of this works as well. What's my goal? After I make this Tanai, let's just play this through. I make this Tanai on Rosh Hashanah or on Yom Kippur. What's my goal? What's my goal with this Tanai? Don't make Nedarim. That's my goal. The Tanai is a fail-safe. In the event that I make a Neder, the Neder will be batal. But Abaye says the Tanai only works if you don't remember the Tanai at the time you're making the Neder. Why? Because if you remember the Tanai, and what? You make the Neder anyway, what does that show? What does that show? You're being mevatel the Tanai. You're negating the Tanai because you're choosing to actively make a Neder. That's Abaye's case. That's Abaye's case. Comes along Rava. Rava says, fine, I agree with that, but there's also another more nuanced case. The other more nuanced case is talking about a guy who doesn't just say in general, no Nedarim, no, all right, I hereby mevatel all my Nedarim, but rather in this case, this guy is mevatel a certain sug, a certain category of Nedarim, right? So let's say at the beginning of the year, he says, any Nedarim I make about wine should be batal. Okay, year goes on. Now what happens? He doesn't remember. He doesn't remember what type of Nedarim he went ahead and made the Tanai about. Was it wine? Was it bread? Was it fruit? Was it this? So Rava says, in that case, and now he makes a neder. Shabbos say, as long as he remembers the Tanai at the time he made the neder, he's covered. So let's say it turns out that Lamaisa, he originally made a Tanai about wine. Now he makes a neder not to drink wine. The Tanai ultimately will help prevent the neder from taking hold. But in that case, if he doesn't remember the nature of the neder, he doesn't remember the Tanai at the time of the neder, then ultimately, again, the Tanai will not be effective. So therefore, again, Abaye and Rava, and that's if you look at the Ran over says just very quickly, the second line of the Ran, Rava Amar Kigon Shehisna, Berashna V'lo Yada Mima Hisna, Rava Lo Asli Deflugi Ale Dabai. Rava's not coming to argue. They're talking about two different cases. So both say, skip down a little bit in the Ran. You see in the Ran where it says, Ula Inyan Halacha. So both say, there comes along the Ran and says, Ula Inyan Halacha, Kaimalan Kirava. Hilchach nachtinon dekol shehisna mitchila kol neder ubishas nidro shachach tino nidro bata. So we're going to see, in fact, halach l'maisa, we really paskin both like Abaye and like Rava. Everything just depends ultimately again on the nature of the Tanai. On the nature of the Tanai. Remember again, Abosai, one more time, Abaye is just talking about a general Tanai to proactively negate all Nedarim. And Abaye says again, in that case, the Tanai works as long as you don't remember it at the time of the Neder. Otherwise, if you remember it, you're dafka overriding it. Rava's case is a more specific type of Neder. They both say, if you skip down the Ran just a little bit, actually it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom of the Ran. They both say, get ready for this. This is incredible. We'll spend the last few moments on this. Venira, Shemasha Omrim Biktsas Kihilos Piyom Kippurim Kol Nidre Ve'esare. So we'll say, here it is. We'll say, in other words, where do we come up with this idea of Kol Nidre? Right? We'll say, remember again, what's the lashon of Kol Nidre? Just tell you, Kol Nidre Ve'esare, Ushavue, V'charame, V'koname, V'kinuse, V'kinuye, D'indarna, Udishtaban. And I will say, Kol Nidre happens to Kol Nidre happens to include not just Nedarim, but also includes Shavuos, which we haven't discussed, right? And what happens? So, right, D'ishtaban Darsana Nafshasana, Miyom Kippurim Zeh, Ad Yom Kippurim Abba. Now, I will say, here we're going to get it if we have time. So, right, the lashon of Kol Nidre is from this Yom Kippur until next Yom Kippur. What should happen? Kulun ischaratna, proactive charata. Kulin yasharan shavikin shavisin betelin muvutalin. Right. So we'll say, what are we doing in Kol Nidre? It's a proactive revocation of every single neder and shvuah throughout the year. Says the Ran. He says, "Ledavar zehe miskavnin lift lebatel nedarim sheyardu laachar mikan ela shalashona mishubash shenir mishimelashonam shematir nedarim she'avru." Kabbalah said this is so incredible. If you notice, by the way, there are different versions of Kol Nidre. See, Rabbi say The pure version of Kol Nidre is ultimately, again, a future-oriented tefillah, right? Or revocation. If you look in Mary the Machzorim, there's a bracketed phrase. What's the bracketed phrase? Miyom Kippurim sha'avar agam Kippurim zeh. So the Ran says, whoa. Where did that come from? Rabbi said, by the way, we already take care of past Nedarim. How do we take care of past Nedarim? Hataras Nedarim. That we took care of. Says the Ran, there's a mistake that many Kehilos make that they use Kol Nidre for retroactive revocation, right? That's not what Kol Nidre is for. Kol Nidre ultimately, again, is the way that we proactively revoke Nedarim for the year to come. He says, goes on, he says, Ela Shalashonam Meshubash, Shnir Milashonim Shematir Nedarim Sha'avru, Ve'ein Ze'el Inyan, Ve'ein Lo Inyan Ela, Nedarim Haboim Mi'ala Achar Mikan. So Rabbi said, it's just very interesting. This happens to be a fundamental machlokes in the mechanics of Kol Nidre as well. But the Ran telling us, I just want to point out, it's an incredible Kol Nidre, which for so many Jews, interestingly enough, is like one of the most emotional tefillahs. Even though, again, the topic of the tefillah is not all that emotional, but Lamaisa just pointing out how the concept of Kol Nidre comes from today's daf. The ability to stand up at Rosh Hashanah at the beginning of the year and go ahead and say proactively, any neder I will make throughout the year. Ultimately, again, kulan yahon betelin umuvutalin lo sharirin v'lakayamin. I don't want my nidarim to take hold. So again, the Ran himself goes on. The Ran himself goes on and discusses this idea. And I will say, let's just finish up the Gemara very quickly. So I will say, we're going to see the Rambam Miras Hashem in this sugya as well tomorrow. Because again, the real question now we have outlying is what? Well, so I said Kol Nidre, right? All of us said Kol Nidre. So I say, I make a neder. I make a neder throughout the year. So now what? Is it that as long as I don't remember Kol Nidre at the time of my Nedarim, ultimately, again, the neder is void? Or is it dafka if I remember Kol Nidre at the time of my neder? So we'll have to see that nuanced piece. Just one last thing that I want to end off with. Rav Huna Bar Chinina savar lemidrashay bepirka. Rav Huna Bar Chinina wanted to speak publicly about this concept. He wanted to darshan it at the shir. So what happened? Amar le Rava Tana kamestayim lestume kedei shlo yinhag kalos rosh b'nedarim va'at darashta lebepirka. So it's actually very interesting. So what happened? So Rav Huna wanted to publicize this ruling that you can make a proactive revocation of nedarim. So comes along Rava, and Rava says, no, do not publicize this. The Tana purposely did not publicize this idea because out of a concern that people are going to take Nedarim lightly, right? If I have this proactive revocation, people are going to take it lightly. Therefore, don't teach it in public. So we'll stop over here for today. And we're going to pick up with this concept tomorrow. So what do we do with this? How do we deal with this? And halacha lamaisa, practically, how does Kol Nidre work for us? Osai shkoyach. All right, everyone have a great day. Good to see everyone.